Okay, so Michael, welcome back to the Leadermorphosis podcast.
Awesome. Lisa, it's so nice to see you again. I love to come back here. There aren't that many good podcasts thinking about change, thinking about the real nuance of organizational life, and yours is really one of the very best. So I'm flattered to be asked.
Oh, thank you. I didn't even pay you to say that.
Wait, what? I, did I misunderstand what we were? Okay. But if you're not, I take it all back then. What am I doing here? Okay. But no.
So I was saying a little bit to you before we started recording that one of my reasons for wanting to talk to you was that sometimes I find myself in conversations with people who are a bit allergic to terms like psychological safety, and they feel like there's a lot of fluffiness when it comes to talking about relationships and how we collaborate and all of this kind of stuff, and conflict and all of that stuff feels like, let's just cross that bridge when we get to it. Let's do the real work. And one of the things I wanted to dig into with you is like why relationships at work are important and why it's important to attend to them, to give them some attention, because good relationships don't happen by accident. So I was curious also to ask you to open up the conversation, like, why did you write this book? Because you're sort of known as the coaching guy. I mean, you've written books on a number of topics, but why did this topic feel important to you?
Well, it probably starts off by me sharing some of the same skepticism of some of your clients and your listeners, and a slight allergy to jargon and woo-woo and fluff, because I think they're right. There's a way that some of this stuff can feel vague and like you have to wear a caftan and you have to like incense. And I'm like, I am not that type of person. And I just also know that working with the human beings in the places where we do get to work with them is actually the magic. It's actually both the mess and the glory of the work that we do. And as you say, I'm best known for a book called The Coaching Habit. And I think of the coaching habit as, let me unweird coaching so that it feels like an everyday practical tool for normal people to go, look, this helps me and it helps them and it helps my team and it helps my organization to focus on what matters and to bring out their best. And I wrote How to Work with Almost Anyone for the same reason, which is like, look, fluffy or not, you can give it whatever label you want, but your happiness and your success is really influenced by the quality of your working relationships. And if you doubt that, let me just show it to you. I just want you to think of one of your worst working relationships. Just bring that person to mind. My guess is you have a person. My guess is you've had a moment where you're like, oh my God, this is just awful working with this person. It might be a boss, it might be a client, it might be a colleague, it might be somebody who reports up to you. And just think of the impact that person had on your life. Just how did it make you think about your work? How did it make you think about yourself? How did it make you think about life outside work? I don't know exactly what words are coming to people's minds, but there are words like, I felt angry, I felt sad, I wanted to quit, I felt diminished, I felt annoyed, I felt stuck. There's a real influence that a bad working relationship can have. And it's regardless of what the work was. Like, you could be working on the coolest project, and if you have a bad boss, it sucks. And likewise, if you think about some of the very best working relationships you've had, I hope you can call somebody to mind where you're like, oh man, that was cool. Like, I just liked working with that person. Somehow we clicked. Somehow we were more than the sum of our parts. And the experience of that work was actually pretty great. And again, doesn't even matter what you were working on. You could be working on a kind of pretty quotidian everyday project. But if you've got somebody who's like, this is a cool person to work with, it's got some magic to it. These relationships make just a big difference to our happiness and to the success of our work, because we perform better when we're in better working relationships. And I just want to give people some permission to do something about that, rather than just cross their fingers and go, I hope this person doesn't suck. I hope this person stays really good. I hope this relationship is actually all it promises to be. I can't solve every working relationship. That's why the book's called How to Work with Almost Anyone. But almost every relationship you have can be a little bit better. And if it can be a little bit better, this isn't some weird HR initiative. This is you being happier and you being more successful. And if you'd like some of that, then this is a good podcast episode to listen to.
Yeah, great pitch. Thank you. Yeah, it just makes me think of when you have those bad relationships and that friction, it takes up so much energy.
Mm,
It takes up energy. Like you find yourself having back channel conversations with other colleagues or offloading to your partner at the end of the day, and it's like occupying you. It's like,
yeah.
it's the worst.
The things that I hate are the melodrama that plays out in my own head when I reimagine the conversations I wanted to have with this person, where I deal a demolishing blow and I crush them. And I'm like, I mean, first of all, that's never going to happen. And B, why am I even thinking about it? I'm supposed to be cooking dinner or going to the gym or reading a book, and I'm somehow caught up in this drama. It really does. It really contaminates your life, a bad working relationship.
Yeah. So I love your invitation as well, that because I really think like we're not taught how to maintain relationships or how
Yeah.
to have good relationships. So I think so many of us go through life thinking that it's kind of luck of the draw, and if you have a good one, great,
Yeah.
and you have a bad one, bad luck, and if there's
Yeah.
no opportunity to improve the not so good ones, we think it's just like a chemistry thing, and sometimes it
Right.
is. But I love this invitation that no, we can have a much more empowered way of relating to our relationships, and at any moment we could take a step to try and make it a better one, right?
Yeah, I mean, the way I think about it and talk about it in the book is your quest is to have the best possible relationship with some of these key people. So that doesn't set an objective scale going, every relationship has to be 8 to 10 on the good relationship scale. It says for you and that other person, there's a certain amount of potential. There's a certain amount of goodness you can get with that person. Sometimes it's high, sometimes it's low, but you want to get as close to maximizing that as possible. So, I mean, honestly, I honestly think that actually some of this stuff that we're going to talk about is best applied to your worst relationships. Because if you're thinking of those relationships that currently suck for you, what if they could move from, unworkable to workable, unbearable to bearable, not good enough to being just good enough? That's actually going to make a big difference to the quality of your life.
Yeah, totally. It's like you don't have to have everyone be your best friend. Like that's not what we're
No,
aiming for, but we want it to
yeah,
be at least
exactly.
workable.
You want it to be workable. And so it's worth going. I mean, this is something that people can do right now so that the rest of this podcast has a kind of specific way you're applying it. Like, think of the 5 people in your working relationship right now that have an impact on your happiness and your success. It doesn't have to be the obvious ones like your boss or somebody on your team. It can be anybody in that kind of ecosystem of your life. But just think of some people right now, because as we go through some of the ideas I've got, maybe you'll want to actually apply them to 1, 2, or more of those people.
Yeah, nice. So let's explore then this idea of a best possible relationship. What are the principles of a best possible relationship?
Yeah. So there are 3. There are 3 kind of pillars to what makes up for a BPR, best possible relationship. The first is that it needs to be safe. Now, pretty much everybody listening to this podcast has probably heard of psychological safety. Some people roll their eyes slightly at that. Some people nod along going, no, I've heard of that. I think it's probably important. I think I understand that. But if I go, so how do you do psychological safety? Most people are like, uh, do you just be nice? And it's like, it is definitely not just being nice. I mean, Amy Edmondson has been going on about this for, I don't know, what, 20 years or 25 years now, quite a long time. And I love the core insight, which is if a team feels safe that somebody can say, hey, this isn't working, that team will overperform a team where people don't feel that they can bring what's not working to the table. So it's really practical. It's like, how does your team work better? It works better if people feel safe enough to raise their hand. It's expanded slightly, so it's also, I think, allowing people to show up as they want to in their work rather than having to wear a mask, having to kind of play a role that fits in with the dominant culture, that contributes as well. But that's the essence of it. It needs to be safe. Um, Now, that's all well and good, and that's definitely where we should start. I don't think that's enough. I have been in some psychologically safe relationships that were also boring. I mean, it's like, it's fine, it's pleasant, it's encouraging, it's kind of appreciative, but I want a little bit more than that. And I think the second element you want is it needs to be vital. Now, vital is a good word because it means full of life, and it also means essential. But I'm going for the full of life definition, which is like it has to have a vibrancy to it. It has to feel a bit dangerous, a bit challenging at times. You need to be able to step out to the edge of what you know and how you feel. You need to be willing to maybe raise a challenge, to say I disagree, to have some form of healthy conflict. You need to be able to step into ambiguity and navigate that with that other person. Good relationships have this mix of safe and vital. Just like going to the gym. When you go to the gym, you need to work out, you need to rest, and that's how you get strong. Same with relationships. They need to have this dance between, it needs to be safe enough, and it also needs to be vital. So I'm stretched and I'm grown as well. And then after safe, after vital, you also have repairable. Now, I read a lot of relationship experts in writing this book. People who are talking about more romantic and family relationships, and across all of them, everybody from Esther Perel to Dan Siegel to the Gottmans, they're like, here's a key insight that we all agree on. One is the relationships that get repaired are the relationships that thrive and grow and become stronger. And the other part of that insight is most of us suck at repair. Most of us, it's scary, and our little lizard brain takes over, and we kind of go, "Oh yeah, we were working fine for a year, but this has happened. It's probably all over now." And in work, repair just happens a little bit over time, but it's different from deliberate repair. Different from saying, "Hey, this isn't quite working. Can we sort this out together?" So BPR, safe, vital, and repairable. And remember, you're trying to do this with all your relationships, not just the good ones, but you're trying to make the really great ones great for longer. You're trying to make the good ones in the middle have a little bit more magic, and you're trying to make the bad ones less unbearable.
Yeah, I love those principles. Um, yeah, and it applies to like so many of my relationships. When I think about it, the ones that are the most rewarding, the ones
Hmm.
that are memorable, where you really grow, are the ones where it gets a bit crunchy sometimes, and when you can kind of move through that. It doesn't just, I find like that repair piece as well. It's not just that it repairs it or kind of, gets it back to where it was. It almost like enhances it
Agreed.
because you've been through that together.
Yeah, you've actually built a degree of vulnerability, a degree of trust, a degree of actually, this is worth us working on it together to make it better. So there's an implicit, you're valuable, I'm valuable, this relationship is valuable, that inherently just kind of elevates the quality of the relationship right away.
Yeah. And that's such a mindset change from, if there's a conflict, that's a failure. Something went wrong. If I
Yeah.
have a tension with you or something, it's like it's a bad thing or I'm going to come and attack you, rather than seeing it as like it's a gift. I think you talk about this in the book actually, about bids. It's like a bid
Yeah,
for our relationship. It's saying,
that's it.
hey, I care enough about our
Exactly.
relationship to make a bid to see if we can improve it.
Yeah, the whole bid idea is idea from the Gottmans, a couple that specialize in relationships. If you're looking for one really good book, it's called The Seven Secrets of a Successful Marriage. And this is science-based. And they say we can tell within 90 seconds of seeing a couple whether their relationship will last or not, which is, daunting. Yeah. Um, but they say one of the ways you can tell if a relationship's going to be last is the ratio of positive actions against negative actions. There'll always be negative actions. It's about the ratio. And I think they say you need a ratio of about 6-1, 6 positive to 1 negative. And it doesn't have to be an explicit, hey, I love you. It can be simply, a touch on the shoulder. It can be simply, hey, did you read that? It can be simply a text going, hey, here's a meme. These little things, these little reaching across. That's what they call bids, as a way of kind of just keeping that relationship going.
So I was thinking, you had this lovely invitation of listeners having in mind one or more relationships. So
Hmm.
I guess if we look at like the life cycle of a relationship, what are some things we can do to set up a relationship in a good way from the beginning?
Yeah.
If you and I were to start working on a project together, what could we do to try and get off to a good start?
Well, this is the kind of the core practical idea of the book, which is if you're at the start of a relationship, or even if you're in the middle of the relationship, which covers everything, it is a really good idea to have what the book calls a keystone conversation. And a keystone conversation simply says, let's have a conversation about how we work together before we start working together. And it kind of sounds obvious when you put it like that, which is like, yeah, that seems sensible. But most of the time we don't do that. Most of the time we just kind of go, all right, let's plunge on in because the work is there and it is urgent and it is exciting and this is how we've always done it. And we'll just assume that all the relationship stuff will work out. It's all about the task. Um, but in fact, it's really about the people doing the task. And so by able to focus on, hey, how should we work together? That actually sets you up for success. And in fact, we did this a tiny little bit before you hit record, because I said, hey, Lisa, how do I be a really brilliant guest for you? Like, I really want you to go, I was so delighted I invited Michael back on this podcast. It wasn't a mistake after all. And I would like people to go, Michael is a great guest. Maybe I'll go and check out his books or his pod or whatever. So it behooves both of us for us to go, how do we do this well? But it's tempting not to, because I've been on like 400 podcasts and you've hosted about 400 podcasts. And we're both in the groove of doing the work. We could have just stepped into it. But just that little conversation, how do we work best together, sets this conversation up for success.
It's so true. And I know that like sometimes there are things out there like people have these templates like use a manual to me and these kinds of
Yeah,
things, um, which which in my experience like is often like a lovely intention and very rarely actually happens.
I agree. Like the idea of the user manual, if people haven't come across that, is you kind of write out hey, let me tell you how I work. And you send it off to people going, you now know how to work best with me. And implicit in that is, so don't screw it up, because I've actually given you the keys to the castle here, and you should be able to figure this out. And if that's the way it works, it tends not to work particularly well. If you write this stuff out and then you have a conversation about it, that can be that's much better. And in fact, I talked to somebody just on the weekend who said, we've taken our user manuals and we've loaded them up to our AI thing. I think they were using Claude. And now I can draw on that anytime I'm in conflict with somebody in my team. So Tony was like, so uh, something's off with me and Lisa. This is what happened. What's going on? And Claude will go, well, I've just checked Lisa's user manual and she likes this. And you said you did that. Maybe that's the cause of conflict. So there is a way that that can be helpful. However you come at it, you want to go, how are we going to work together? A conversation, not just let me tell you how I want you to work with me and then we're done.
Yeah, and I think that's also the difference between, every combination of people, we're going to have a different capacity to
Right.
flex in certain ways, right? Like some people, like I'm a very flexible person. So I can work with, when I'm leading courses, I can work with someone who doesn't like to structure things too much. I could be okay with that. And I can also work with someone who likes a lot of structure.
Yeah.
But there, some of my other colleagues, like if they work together, that they really have to navigate that because
Right.
that's really challenging for them. So it wouldn't be fair for me to say, I always have to work in this way, so bend to my will kind of thing. It's like we
Right.
have to navigate it with each
Yeah.
relationship.
Yeah. It's kind of like a co-created thing. And, as Lisa, you and I are like, you have to navigate it, you have to co-create it. to the skeptics who are listening to this, it's like, go beyond the slight woo-woo-ness of those words. And just, it's like, you have to figure this out together because different person, different context, you're going to have different rules. And so you don't have to make a big deal about this. You can just be a real quick check-in going, hey, how should we do this together? What can I do that would make it better? What should I not do that might make it worse? How about you? Okay, good. Just that alone, 5-minute conversation already makes things a lot better.
Yeah, exactly. I think sometimes it can seem intimidating or like it's going to be a lot of work to have all of these conversations. And really, it's like if you set it up in a good way or a best possible way,
Yeah,
and then you have these little like touch adjustments, you know, if you then do bump into some conflicts, which is very likely, you have a stronger foundation to kind of be able to approach that
yeah,
compared to like, having nothing and then suddenly hitting this conflict. Then it's like you have no foundation to talk about that.
that's right. A mentor of mine, a guy called Peter Block, who is probably a friend of the podcast because I love him too. Um, the origin of all this for me was him teaching what he called social contracting, which is his language for exactly this, which is let's figure out how this works together. Now, social contracting, I don't think is a particularly great title because it can mean any number of different things. But the basics is the same, which is like, so how does this work? You and me working together. And one of his insights, which I thought was really powerful, was the things you don't talk about in that initial conversation are the things that it is always hard to talk about. And in the days when I was a consultant, I would really notice this, that anytime I kind of chickened out and I didn't talk about the money, it was always hard to talk about the money. And when I was brave and I went, this is how much I cost and this is how much this is going to cost, it just made money something that we could talk about. So one of the unexpected benefits of this conversation is, A, you'll get answers in the moment, but really what you're doing is giving each other permission to keep talking about how you're doing in this relationship on an ongoing basis.
It reminds me of something you say. I think it's in like the end of the book. You have these kind of question and answer section, and you say something like, does it ever get less awkward or easier? And your answer is something like, kind of yes, but also kind of no.
Yeah,
but it's always like, it's the more you practice it, it gets a little less awkward, but it's always going to feel a bit uncomfortable and a bit risky, right?
it always does because both of you are opening up a little or a lot. And quite often, if you've become the person who is brave enough to initiate this conversation, you're often working with somebody who has never really had this conversation before. So you see them kind of, their eyes go wide open and they're like, what the hell is this conversation is about? I just wanted a project management plan. And now we're talking about feelings or, working together. But it becomes unweird pretty quickly because almost everybody wants a better working relationship with almost everybody.
So let's talk a bit about then. So let's assume we had a good keystone conversation that set up our collaboration, and then
Yeah.
somewhere along the way, something breaks down. Something happens, and all of a sudden, I start to read your emails as if they're in capital letters, and you're like through this tone, and I'm like,
Yes.
you know, what what can we do then? Like how does the keystone conversation or what have you found helps to
Well,
get the relationship back on
yeah.
track?
Well, let me ask. I've got some thoughts, but let me ask you first. What have you already found that helps in terms of how you've, in your very best, how you've kind of fixed a situation like that?
Yeah, well, I think I'm I'm a people pleaser and I want people to like me. And as I said, I'm quite flexible and accommodating, which is a quality, and it's a pitfall when I'm too much of that. It's like it takes a lot for me to dare to speak up about what I need or if something's not working for me. So what's helped me a lot is, and this is the another reason why I love your books, is having like a shared language or like
Right.
almost like code words for these things. So
Right.
my colleagues and I, we have what we call a pebbles conversation. So at any
Brilliant.
moment, one of us can message the other on Slack and say, "Hey, can we have a Pebbles conversation?" And we know that that means we want to have a conversation about our relationship. And there's a pebble. There's like a small pebble in our shoe
That's
that's getting in
great.
the way for the relationship to be as
Yeah.
good as it could be. And, it's still a bit scary. It still takes courage to reach out and be like, rather than
Mm.
complain or be like, oh, maybe it'll fix itself, being like, no, I'm going to reach out. I'm going to ask if we can have a Pebbles conversation. But just having that shared language makes it a little more
Yeah.
safe. And we kind of share the kind of the emotional load of that really by committing
Yeah.
together in our company culture to doing that.
I tell you what I love about that. First of all, it's a beautiful phrase. I hope people borrow it and steal it and make it their own, because it it already frames it as, this is not a big thing, but it is a thing. And this is annoying at the moment, and it will actually get really annoying if this carries on. Like, I haven't got a blister yet, but I'm already starting to limp just slightly. So there's that. The language itself carries a metaphor of, I'm not blowing this up out of proportion. I want to frame this as a small thing and a solvable thing. We just need to figure out how to get the pebble out of the shoe. Part of what's really powerful about this kind of code word or a kind of shared language around that is it helps people temper their response. So if you're not expecting a conversation and somebody comes to you with the very best of intention and goes, hey, can we have a chat because this is beginning to suck a little bit? There is just no way that your lizard brain doesn't go into fight or flight or faint or fawn or whatever all the F's are these days. There's a response you have. It's biological. It's like what your body does when it's feeling threatened. And then somebody going, this isn't working for me, is a threat. So by going, hey, can we have a Pebble conversation on Slack? Your colleague can go, feel the rush. Do I run away? Do I fight back? And then go, okay, I can self-regulate. I can bring myself down so that when we have that conversation, I'm in a more generous mood. And I'm moved from a commitment to protect myself to a commitment to solve this together. Um, in the book, there are 5 questions that are part of the Keystone conversation. The 5th one is, how will we fix it when things go wrong? And I think why that's a good question is, first of all, it says things will go wrong. It's an inevitability. There's not yet been a single working relationship you ever had that hasn't been a bit suboptimal at some stage. And so, at the same time, we so often enter these relationships going, I'm sure this will be fine. I'm sure we'll never have a fight. You're in that kind of honeymoon period for at least 60 seconds. So how will we fix it when things go wrong? So there's a kind of agreement that something will go wrong. And then how will we fix it? So it actually says, look, let's make a shared agreement that we care enough about this working relationship that we'll both try and fix it when things go wrong. And this can be really helpful if, like Lisa, and a bit like me as well, you're a people person and you're like, I don't love conflict. I'd rather us be happy. And B, I'll take all the responsibility on and the sadness and the guilt and the frustration of this working relationship. It actually is a way of giving permission and removing a weight of responsibility as well, because becoming shared is really helpful. So, with you and that person you've had this conversation with, how will you fix it when things go wrong? You may have identified your pebble in a shoe phrase or some other way of just flagging, hey, this isn't great for me. In an earlier job, what we called was an off my chest conversation, which is like, I just need to get something off my chest. And that's I thought, a helpful phrase because again, it preps the person so they don't have to freak out if I just come "Rah!" at them. But it also says it's like, we may not even have to fix anything here. I just may have to have a little bit of a rant or a little blurt just to kind of express something, and that may be sufficient. So different phrases, but they all kind of contribute to the same sort of effect, which is, can you make your way back and be the person brave enough to say, this relationship matters out for me and for them and for us. So how do we try and figure this out?
Hmm. Yeah, and what I've learned is, yeah, for you and I as people pleasers, people. I've learned that, like, actually it doesn't help the relationship for me to sort of hog the responsibility, or to suppress my needs, or to sort of, censor myself. That very often, now when I bring up a pebble, sometimes it's like it takes 2 minutes to have the conversation, and I'm like, I have this story in my head that you think that I am really rude because I did this, and this, and very often the person's like, no, not at
Yeah,
all.
yeah,
Honestly, didn't even cross my mind. I'm like, okay, oh, good, great,
yeah,
and then I don't have to be like thinking about it that night at dinner. I put it
yeah,
on the table, we talked about it, we cleaned it up, it was fine.
yeah.
Um,
And I mean, there's something wise about a trying to do it when it's smaller rather than bigger. I was taught in a really helpful way, which is as early as you can in the relationship, make a correction and don't make a big deal about it. Just kind of go, hey, I know she did this. My preference is if you do that. And it just normalizes adjustment and fine tuning. The other insight, which is a bit more provocative, comes from my friend Leanne Davey, who wrote a book called The Good Fight. And her insight is, in the book, it is, fighting's helpful. Yeah, so learn how to fight well in a way that is productive and respectful. Um, but when I talked to her on my podcast, it was even more provocative. She said, it is your obligation to have fights. If nobody's fighting, something's gone wrong, because you're not at the edge of something where there's tension and where there's different perspectives and where you're actually stretching. You're in some sort of warm morass of it's like a 2-day-old bath that you're all sitting in. It's like
oof.
it's that telling metaphor there. Um, um, and so she's like, your job, and this is in the context of change in particular, where look, things are changing. Your job is to find the conflict and bring the conflict out so you can have a good fight about it.
So true. My colleague Karen, she has this great phrase about the prison of politeness.
Oh, yeah.
That when we're in this kind of false harmony sort of state, and very polite, and I'm British, so we're very guilty of this. Um, there's this like ugly side to that, where we're
Yeah.
not really, that there isn't actually, ironically, isn't really psychological safety there, because it's so
No.
scary to kind of rupture that. Then if I have even a small thing, I'm like, oh god, I don't want to disrupt this like perfect glossy kind
Yeah.
of politeness, and then you get all kinds of things kind of festering under the surface.
And one way of understanding that is through the Karpman drama triangle. Do you know this model? Yeah, I love it. It's one of the kind of core models I use to understand me and the world. It's got its roots in transactional analysis, TA, which gives you language that isn't helpful at work, like parent-child relationships and adult-to-adult relationships. That all feels a bit too therapy. But it says, look, when things get dysfunctional, and relationships always get dysfunctional, these 3 different roles play out. There's the victim, there's the persecutor, and there's the rescuer. All 3 of those are equally dysfunctional. The rescuer sounds like it's a bit healthier and better than the persecutor and the victim, but it is just as dysfunctional. Most people self-identify as a rescuer, which I think might be the move of a victim, but no matter. Here's what I think is really powerful. Rescuers create victims. Rescuers create persecutors. So even as we tell ourselves a story, because if I'm going to play a role, it'll be the rescuer most often. Even as we tell ourselves a story, oh, look at me, I'm so noble. I'm self-sacrificing for the harmony and the goodness of me and them and the team and whatever. Actually, you're an engine of dysfunction, and you're actually helping trigger other people playing dysfunctional roles as well.
Mm. I also think listening to you now about how many managers and leaders there are who are really well intentioned when they see two members of their team having a conflict or their relationship has broken down, they go into that rescuer role
Right.
and then create this drama triangle. And that's why I so long for everyone in every organization, whether you're a manager or an individual contributor, to be, equipped with some of these principles in your book
Right.
and some of the things that we train. Because if all of us had a little bit more confidence and a little bit more um some tools or some principles to help us maintain our own relationships, then we don't need to go to HR every time some small thing happens, or we don't need to get our
Yeah.
manager to rescue us, which kind of just creates that whole codependency thing.
Yeah. And it's not like it's weird or odd that this stuff is happening. It is the warp and weft of everyday working. You're always working with other people. You are messy, using irrational and odd, and so are they. So it's going to be, at times confusing as to what's going on. But as soon as you elevate it to say, hey, we can actually talk about how we work together rather than just watching the weirdness play out and feeling bitter and twisted about it, that's helpful for everybody.
Yeah. And I've been worrying a lot lately that I've been thinking a lot about, like, you talked at the top about psychological safety is not like it's not psychological comfort, right?
Right.
And I'm worried that in many ways, and I think AI is exacerbating this in some ways, we're kind of trying to remove friction from our lives in all kinds of places. And I think that's such a shame because, like you said, that takes the vitality out of things.
Yeah.
That takes the growth and the learning edge out of things. And I think relationships are a really good arena for us learning to be with friction because
Right.
that's generative.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, part of the reason I play in this world of how we are at work is that work is where most of us learn and grow and become the next best versions of who we might be. But, we only unlock our greatness by working on the hard stuff. And, perhaps brilliantly, perhaps terrifyingly, perhaps both. AI is now doing a lot of the tasky stuff, or will have the capacity for that, or at least will. I mean, it's Tuesday now. By Thursday, we'll definitely have that capacity. So what does that leave? Well, it leaves partly you going, how do I work with other people to kind of bring out our best together? What do I do as a leader? It's like I provide context and I find connections and I provide courage and perhaps clarity rather than certainty. That's my job now that the AI can do all that other stuff. But that involves getting into the messiness of human beings.
I want to talk about something because it feels important to me to kind of clarify what we're talking about when we're talking about having these relationship conversations. Because to bring in another example, I don't know if you've come across this, but many people listening to this will be familiar with nonviolent communication.
Yeah, Marshall
Um,
Rosenberg's work.
exactly. And one thing that I've seen is that brilliant, brilliant work, really useful practice. And I've also seen people kind of weaponize it or
Mhm.
misunderstand it. And I've heard people, for example, kind of use the framework to be kind of like not really in a team spirit sort of way, like being like,
Right.
Michael, when you did this, it made me feel this. Don't do that ever again. It'd be like,
Right.
you can't say anything now because I use the nonviolent communication framework. Bye,
Right.
kind of thing,
Right.
if I exaggerate.
But
So,
yeah, and you probably don't. And it's the same with like Kim Scott's work in Radical Candor.
yeah,
You're like, allow me to be an asshole now because I'm being radically candid with you. And I'm like,
yeah.
yeah, all of these things risk a way of going, this just allows me to attack you in an apparently justified way.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So and in the book you have some really lovely principles. I think you have 6 principles of maintenance, but what are the principles for, if I'm going into one of these conversations, how can I go in with a kind of positive intent? How can I show up in a way that serves the relationship instead of, as we just talked about, kind of, coming in on the attack or
Yeah.
dumping something on someone?
Well, I mean, there's no doubt that, um, you know, almost anything can be picked up and used as a weapon. Uh, and the fact that if you're thinking about that and worrying about that, it already means that you're less likely to be doing that in the first place. So one of the ironies of this is whatever I've got to share here, people probably already understand, and they're probably not going to be the people who are attacking you. So a couple of thoughts. One is a framework I found really helpful is to understand there are 2 sides of the table, and my job is to manage my side of the table, and their job is to manage their side of the table. And I have no control over what's happening on their side of the table, which means I um, I can do all I can to do this work with the best spirit and the best intent that I can, and it'll either work or it won't work with them, because not every one of these relationship conversations works. Most of them do. Most of them move things forward a little bit, but sometimes the other person's like, "I'm not going to talk about this stupid stuff with you. I don't even like you. Forget it." And they're responsible for how they show up, and you're responsible for how you receive how they show up. So a deal of this is about being committed to you, committed to them, committed to the we of it, but also holding yourself with boundaries and maintaining your own identity around that as well. Um, in the Coaching Habit, which is my kind of most famous book, is 10 years old. And we've just published a 10-year edition of it, which is very exciting. It's a hardback, and it's got a extra couple of chapters and a graphic novel threaded through it and a little Easter egg scattered around, which I love. And in this bonus chapter I've written, which is about the being of coaching, I talk about these 4 paradoxes that drive how we show up in the world. The first paradox is about how you hold yourself, which is with humble confidence. You need your feet in the mud, but you also need to have a kind of a lit lantern in terms of shining the best of who you are. There's a paradox about how you hold yourself in relationship to other people, which is with fierce love. I'll come back to that. There's a paradox about how you hold yourself around the process, which is both light and grounded. And there's a paradox in terms of how you hold yourself with the outcome, which is both to care and not care. So this is, Lisa, stuff that you'll know in different ways, because this is very much about kind of emergent properties, and paradoxes are inherently how do you not resolve that paradox, but how do you hold it in tension and allow the tension to be the source of energy. But this fierce love, um, in some ways, this is the spirit you need to hold when you're in this building into relationships. And part of it is uh, uh, this kind of strong commitment to the relationship, and a bravery. It's a kind of a courage to show up in the relationship. That's one of the drivers. Another driver is kind of like, this will sound woo-woo, but kind of seeing the sacred glory of that other person. So seeing them at their very best. What Martin Buber would say, an I-thou relationship. But the third driver is kind of like maintaining kind of twin suns. Like, it means, you're both adults, you're building adult to adult relationships, you need boundaries, you need structure, you're okay to say no around that. And I think to be in relationship with a chance of bringing out a best possible relationship, you need to aspire to fierce love with that other person. And you need those three different drivers to hold all the things that will allow you to stay as close to that kind of full expression of fierce love as possible.
Mm, I like that.
Thanks.
I love that you've written a chapter about being as well. I'm always quoting you for saying this kind of phrase of like to be more coaching, and coaching as like a way of being, I think is
Yeah.
very powerful.
Yeah.
Um, I also am looking at my notes from your book, and I highlighted something you said about staying curious. That when you go into one of these um, conversations about the relationship, you say whatever you think is going on, you're wrong. Not totally, but partially, which is such a
Yeah.
good reminder that so often we go into these conversations like, and then the other person shares their side of things, and it's like, oh,
Huh.
there's a whole other
Yeah.
reality over there.
And it's almost impossible not to project a little bit of what this is true for me. So this is how I think it is true for them and for the universe. And part of the gift of this conversation, I mean, the key insight on that extra bonus chapter in the coaching habit is above and beyond coaching, helping you get stuff done. Coaching can really help people feel seen and heard and encouraged. And this is the human work of work, which is like have people feel seen and heard, encouraged, even as they do the stuff that their organization asks of them. And it's really driven by curiosity, a willingness to sit with somebody and go, look, I'm really interested in who you are. I've got some ideas, but rather than working on my assumptions, maybe we can share some information about each other, which will allow us to deepen a little bit in who we are with each other.
Mm, yeah. I've started, I think I stole this from my colleague Carl Eric about thinking about other people as like planets, like I'm planet Lisa,
Cool.
you're planet Michael. And when I'm kind of training people to have these kind of relationship conversations, I try and like model like, it's hard because you're going in and, you're on planet you, but it's to try and go in with this like almost like fascination of like, wow, what's true on planet Michael? Like, what's true over there?
Exactly.
What's the air like? What's the gravity like? And really being curious
Yeah.
instead of having some assumption or, and that helps, I think, get out of the right, wrong, good, bad, but just like, wow, our planets are
Yeah.
so different.
Exactly. I mean, I think I love that, and I would layer on it. There's just this, um, this assumption of positive intent. This assumption of how do I, what I'm looking for is the very best of who they are. Because if you're looking for that, you're going to find something like that.
I've been kind of nerding out recently. I don't know if you've come across this YouTube channel called The Enemies Project.
No, I haven't.
Oh, it's really good. It's this facilitator. I don't know his name actually, but he hosts these conversations with two people with completely polar opposite views
Well, that's great.
and some really tricky stuff. And he takes them through a process where he lets them talk as they normally would, and they argue and nothing happens. And then he takes them through this process where he effectively kind of asks them questions and they listen to each other, and then they swap and they practice being as if they are the other person until they
Yeah.
feel heard.
Yes.
And by the end of it, and the purpose is not for them to agree, but by the end of it, they understand each other more. They sort of see that most of us humans have like the same basic needs, even though
Right.
we might have very different ways of approaching them. So it's just a really beautiful example of, as you said, like how meaningful it is to be seen and heard, which
Yeah.
doesn't necessarily mean agreed with. It just means
No.
that you see or you get how it is
Yeah.
for me or what's important to me. And then we can sort of meet in the middle a bit, come down from our towers, meet in the middle and see what's possible.
That's right. That's right.
Well, we're coming to the end of our time together, and it's never enough time, it feels like. But
It was a lovely conversation, Lisa. Thank you.
thank you. Is there anything you would like to share with listeners, some kind of final words on this topic, or anything else that you would like to offer to them?
Yeah, I've got a kind of it's a slightly overly polished wrap up, so forgive me for the glibness of this, but it's something I heard a while back and it has struck a chord for me, and it is um, an acknowledgement that if you're tempted by this, the first time you have a keystone conversation, the first time you reach out, it is a brave act. It will feel awkward. It will feel strange to you, and probably strange to that other person as well. Um, but the quote I love is, nobody likes to be the first to say hello, but everybody loves to be greeted. And there is something about one of the gifts you can bring the people in the places where you work is to be the first person who says hello, the first person who says, "Hey, I care about this working relationship. Can we have a conversation to see if we can work even better together?"
Glib it all. That was brilliant.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I love that. I really echo that. I really want to normalize. It's like, it's a paradox because it's like, I want to normalize it. And at the same time, it's always going to feel a bit weird, and that's
Yeah,
okay.
yeah,
It's worth doing.
yeah. It is. It is indeed.
Well, thank you so much as always for for your work, for your writing, and for coming on the podcast. I
Lisa,
really
thanks.
appreciate you.
Yeah, it's a really lovely conversation. Thank you for having me.